Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard. Thank you for joining us today. Our guest in studio today is Dr. Alessio Fasano. He is going to be one of the key speakers at the 4th Bioceuticals Research Symposium entitled Revolutionary Strategies for Complex Diseases, where he'll highlight the latest advances in nutritional and integrative medicine, going to be covering a wide range of fields. He's with us today to talk about gut health. He's also the author of Gluten-free, which examines the roadmap to a gluten-free lifestyle. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Dr. Alessio Fasano.
Thank you for having me on the show.
The upcoming 4th Bioceuticals Research Symposium going on in Australia, the 22nd through the 24th of April of this year. Is it the first time that you've attended the symposium?
Yes, indeed it will be my first time.
Now, you're going to be talking to Australian health professionals about the role of gut permeability and autoimmunity, among other things. Talk about celiac disease, gut permeability, and how it relates to what you'll be talking about in Australia.
Sure. Celiac disease is an interesting model of autoimmunity because it has some peculiarities that make this, one of a kind when you compare it to other autoimmune diseases like diabetes or multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. And the recipe is the same. You have to be genetically predisposed, but you have already one specific peculiarity there. Some of the genes that are necessary to develop celiac disease are present almost in the totality of people with celiac disease. That's not typical what we see in other autoimmune disease, to the point that if you don't have those genes, you can't develop the disease. The second ingredient of the recipe to develop autoimmunity is an environmental trigger that is mismanaged by your immune system because of your genetic makeup. So the immune system is there to defend you when you're exposed to enemies, will, deploy, weaponry to, get rid of these enemies. Mm-hmm. And autoimmunity, rather than to fight against the enemy, you start to fight against your own body. The problem is, for the vast majority of the autoimmune diseases, we don't know what's the trigger. While for celiac disease, we know what is the trigger, that is gluten. And as a matter of fact, because we have this kind of information, celiac disease is the only autoimmune disease for which we have a treatment, because you go gluten-free and the symptoms will go away. And third element of this recipe that we're learning through celiac disease is that you have to have a breach of the barrier of the intestine. So in other words, you have to have an increased gut permeability. And that's something that we learned by studying celiac disease pathogenesis. And that now seems to be a commonality with many other autoimmune diseases.
Most of our listeners are healthcare professionals and are familiar with what gluten is. But for those of us who don't know exactly what gluten is, we hear a lot about it. What exactly is gluten?
So gluten is a protein, also in this case a one-of-a-kind protein, and the most abundant one that is present in some grains like wheat, barley, and rye. It's the key proteic elements in these grains that gives you some organoleptic characteristics to these grains in terms of palatability and what you can do with these grains because of the elasticity that this protein gives to the products that are made by these grains like pasta, bread, cookies, beer, and so on and so forth. Being the most abundant protein and therefore extremely well represented in terms of the component of these grains, it turns out also that it's a peculiar protein because contrary to many other proteins that we ingest with foodstuff, we cannot dismantle completely this protein in single blocks, amino acids. So in other words, our digestive enzymes, the best they can do is to cut gluten in pieces, what we call peptides, but not in single elements like amino acids. And when you don't digest completely proteins, if they make the journey through the intestinal barrier comes in, these are the ones that we see as enemies. So the fact that we are not able to completely digest gluten, it makes this a very risky protein if you're genetically predisposed to develop a problem. Now, I know there is a lot of discussion about, gluten and the gluten-free diet and who should not go on a gluten-free diet. And again, there are extremes in a very heated and far to be settled debates. Some people, they said that nobody should be on a gluten-free diet because of this fat, and the other extreme said everybody should go on a gluten-free diet because otherwise, we all would get in trouble. Truth probably somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so that was my next question. As the author of Gluten Freedom, a book that examines the groundbreaking roadmap to a gluten-free lifestyle, I'm sure that you explain who would benefit from such a diet.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are clear cuts. In other words, people that undisputably will benefit to going gluten-free diets, and everybody would agree with that. These are the people they have medical necessity to go gluten-free because if they don't, they get sick. There is a general agreement, that, for example, people with celiac disease, indeed, knowing that gluten is the culprit of the disease, needs to go on a gluten-free diet to stay healthy. And as I was explaining before, knowing that gluten is the instigator of the autoimmune process to characterize celiac disease, and knowing that when you go gluten-free, the autoimmune insult to the intestine is gone, there is no discussion that people with celiac disease need to go on a gluten-free diet. Also, there is no discussion that people that have with allergy need to go on a gluten-free diet. More of a discussion is a third category of people that have been recently, identified, the people that are affected by what we call gluten sensitivity or non-gluten sensitivity. How many they are, if they should go strictly gluten-free, if should not, and so on and so forth.
What are some of the symptoms that one would look for signaling that they should go gluten-free?
That's right. So this is the most challenging part of the story. In the past, when it was originally described, because this is a damaged intestinal, disease, we focus completely on GI symptoms. So diarrhea, abdominal pain, bloating, weight loss, failure to thrive in kids. Those were the landmark of the disease. And, and of course, there is a clear understanding why you have the symptoms if your intestine is destroyed. With more sophisticated tools to diagnose people with celiac disease, we really realize that while the inflammation starts in the gut, it really can spread in any kind of part of the body. So any tissue or organ can be affected. So the answer to your question is vague, unfortunately, because you can really have an unbelievable number of signs and symptoms that do not indicate that the problem is in the gut, starting with chronic fatigue, anemia, joint pain, problem that involves your brain and behavior, from short memory loss all the way to schizophrenia, infertility, osteoporosis, and the list goes on and on and on. Wow. Problem with the skin with dermatitis periformis. So it's truly a clinical chameleon. It's very difficult to answer your question. What kind of symptoms should I look after to consider that I have celiac disease and therefore been screened and eventually embrace a gluten-free diet?
Our guest in studio today has been Dr. Alessio Fasano, going to be visiting Sydney, Australia as a speaker at the 4th Bioceuticals Research Symposium, April the 22nd through the 24th, to educate Australian health professionals on celiac disease and the awareness of celiac disease as a public health problem. And Dr. Fasano says that treating patients for celiac disease could provide clues to treating symptoms of other autoimmune disorders. It's been great having you here with us today, Dr. Fasano.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes.